Lots of American corporations have helped the CCP rise to its current authoritarian glory. But there's one in particular that may just take the cake. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. China has become the world's biggest threat, but it couldn't have done it on its own. Thanks to both stupid naivete and greed, the West has propped up the Chinese Communist Party. Western corporations are especially guilty of this. They've pumped money and technical know-how into China. But one company in particular did more than just that. And it's probably one you've never even heard of. The business I'm talking about is McKinsey and Company, one of the largest consulting corporations in the world. It's been facing a lot of scrutiny over the past few years for advising Chinese state companies, especially since it also contracts to advise the Pentagon. Sadly, none of the advice they gave China was be less evil. McKinsey's links with Chinese companies run deep. Here are just a few examples. Costco. No, not that Costco. This Costco, the China Ocean Shipping Company. It's a state-owned conglomerate that has played a key role in China's naval expansion. Other friends to McKinsey include Sinochem, a state-owned conglomerate that works closely with the PLA and provides Chinese aid to North Korea and Iran. And Shenzhen Dajiang Baiwang Technology Company, a manufacturer that specializes in unmanned aerial vehicles that is owned by the Chinese drone maker DJI. Yes, the same Chinese drone maker that is on a U.S. Department of Commerce blacklisted entities list. Man, with a resume like that, McKinsey and Company is a shoo-in if they submit to get hired by the Legion of Doom. According to this 2018 New York Times article, McKinsey advised at least 22 of China's biggest state-owned companies, the ones carrying out some of the government's most strategic and divisive initiatives. The Times also reported that McKinsey has produced at least 10 reports in Chinese focusing on Made in China 2025. Made in China 2025 is an initiative that aims to reduce China's dependence on foreign technology and make China the dominant developers of high-tech industries like electric vehicles, next-generation information technology, advanced robotics, and AI. By giving out advice for Made in China 2025, McKinsey is basically helping a genocidal authoritarian regime become even more powerful. At this point, I think Lex Luthor might be thinking, wow, that might be a little too evil even for us. McKinsey, of course, tries to downplay its role in China's rise. It claims that reports about its Chinese dealings are misleading, and that McKinsey has a demonstrated record of making a positive difference in authoritarian countries and on behalf of their fellow citizens. Yes, nothing says making a positive difference in authoritarian countries like China than having lavish corporate retreats just a few miles from genocidal concentration camps. What's next? Are they going to take a party bus around Auschwitz? McKinsey also tried to downplay its connections with China by claiming that it never worked with the Chinese Communist Party.
Senator, we've never worked with the Chinese Communist Party or the central government in China, to the best of my knowledge.
But we're talking about China here. Working with any Chinese company, especially state-owned companies, definitely involves getting the CCP's blessings. McKinsey knows this. They may be evil, but they're not stupid and evil. No offense, Bizarro. And here's where things get really sinister. The Financial Times recently put out a report that details how a McKinsey-led think tank advised the Made in China 2025 initiative. And it's pretty damning. I'll tell you all about it after the break. Welcome back. U.S. consulting firm McKinsey and Company has done all sorts of, let's say, questionable business with Chinese firms. But it goes even deeper. The Financial Times reports that a McKinsey-led think tank advised China on the Made in China 2025 policy that fed U.S. tensions. The think tank in question is the Urban China Initiative, or UCI. It put out a 310-page book called Scientific and Technological Revolutions Around the World for the NDRC, a major Chinese government agency that forms and guides economic policies. The book formed part of the Chinese government's research for its 13th five-year plan, covering 2016 to 2020. In all, it made 61 recommendations across 14 different technologies. If you've been following this channel for a while, you may be familiar with how China's been using dual-use commercial military technology and cracking down on foreign companies over national security concerns. And by national security concerns, I mean for funsies. It seems McKinsey may have played a role in that. In one chapter covering advanced materials for cutting-edge manufacturing, the Urban China Initiative recommended that China accelerate the conversion of military technology into civil use and promote the two-way transfer and dissemination of military civil material technology. So that's where they got the idea. It also warned about how relying on foreign suppliers to build China's cloud infrastructure could pose security risks, so China should strive to grow its domestic cloud computing industry and prevent core technologies from being controlled by foreign companies. Now might be a good time to remind everyone that McKinsey and Company is a foreign company. So their advice is basically, don't trust Westerners except for us. Now, please, pay us and don't betray us. The book also advocated for the Chinese government to provide more financial support for domestic Internet of Things companies, so they could eventually take control of the industry from foreign firms. Sound familiar? It should. McKinsey pretty much gave China an instruction manual on how to be a more efficient and dangerous bully. Now, perhaps China was going to pursue these policies regardless of what McKinsey had to say, but it's pretty astonishing that McKinsey would directly help China undermine the US and the rest of the world. McKinsey, of course, has tried to distance itself from the Urban China Initiative, going so far as to claim that the Urban China Initiative was a nonprofit initiative co-founded in 2011 with Columbia University and Tsinghua University. The Urban China Initiative is not McKinsey, and it did not perform work on McKinsey's behalf. To our knowledge, McKinsey was not compensated for any UCI-related research or initiatives. So they're claiming they weren't paid for it. It doesn't really make them look better when their excuse is, we just did it for the love of the game. It also reiterated how the central Chinese government is not and has never been a client of McKinsey. But according to the Financial Times, the UCI's book included a foreword by McKinsey's Shanghai-based senior partner Lola Woltzel, whose listed title was Director of McKinsey Global Institute, which is McKinsey's in-house research division. Woltzel, by the way, also founded UCI in 2011 and co-chaired it. So the Urban China Initiative is not McKinsey. It was just founded and co-chaired by one of the directors of McKinsey's research arm. Got it. Meanwhile, according to the Financial Times, UCI has been described by several people involved as a McKinsey initiative. One said it was initiated and run by McKinsey rather than Columbia or Tsinghua. UCI's Director of Research, Gengtian Zhang, described the organization as McKinsey Shanghai Consulting's Urban China Initiative in a biography in the annual report of a company where he is a director. Other former UCI staff members list themselves as having worked for McKinsey on their LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so when you ask who did you work for, UCI or McKinsey, the answer is yes. In fact, if you look up UCI's address, you'll notice that it's in the same office building as McKinsey's Beijing office. At this point, the only thing that's missing is McKinsey plus UCI carved into a heart in a tree. But I'm sure that's all just a coincidence. And I'm sure it was also a total coincidence that UCI was shut down in 2021, right when McKinsey was facing scrutiny from the US government over its ties to China. McKinsey definitely deserves the scrutiny that it's getting, but there should also be some light shined on all its past and current employees. Some of them are up to no good even after they leave the company. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. McKinsey itself does a lot of bad things, most notably, supporting authoritarian regimes like China. And even as China's economy is crumbling, it's still saying things like how multinational companies should continue to invest in China. But it's not just McKinsey, the corporation, that we have to worry about, though. Some McKinsey employees end up helping the CCP well after their time in the company. Here are just a couple of notable examples. Let's start with Ian Davis, a knighted English businessman. Easily the richest knight working in the shadows since the Dark Knight. Davis is big on promoting engagement with China. On top of being managing director at McKinsey, Davis has served as a member of the Beijing Mayor's International Entrepreneur Advisory Conference. One of the last things he did while he was in McKinsey was sign a memorandum with China's Commerce Ministry back in 2009. After his time in McKinsey, Davis continued working with China as the chairman of Rolls-Royce. In 2020, Davis met with then Chinese ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming, to discuss Rolls-Royce's role in China's aviation industry, which is pretty much him just begging for China to steal Rolls-Royce's technology. His role would be useful idiot. Oh, sorry, Sir Useful Idiot. Knowing how pro-China business people work, I wouldn't be surprised if Davis just shrugged off fears of Chinese espionage. He'd probably say something along the lines of, hey, we've already got dozens of Chinese Communist Party members working in Rolls-Royce. Might as well roll with it. I guess it all paid off because just 2 years after Davis left, Rolls-Royce managed to build a new maintenance, repair, and overhaul plant in Beijing. And I hope Davis won't be too surprised when China screws Rolls-Royce over, just like how China's EVs screwed over foreign businesses that helped develop them. Then there's Dominic Barton, who succeeded Davis as McKinsey's top partner. He recounted how McKinsey was asked by the Chinese government to present some recommendations for economic stimulus programs in 2009. Barton himself apparently presented McKinsey's findings to the NDRC, remember them? Yeah, the same government agency that received the Urban China Initiatives book. Now, not only has he become an adjunct professor at Tsinghua University, the same university McKinsey blamed for the UCI report I mentioned earlier, but he has done a lot to promote business ties with China in Canada. China's business dealings are like Pete Davidson's love life. I have no idea what anyone sees in them or why they keep hooking up, because it always ends poorly. In 2015, Barton co-wrote a piece for the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development, urging Canada to support China's economic and geopolitical ambitions, saying the world is rebalancing towards Asia and China in particular. Canada must rebalance with it. Rebalancing? You mean the way they're all tripping over themselves to get that China money? No wonder it all comes toppling down. Went a little too hard on that rebalancing. Barton later became chair of Tech Resources Limited, a Vancouver-based metals and mining giant partially owned by China Investment Corporation, a Chinese state company. That already raises red flags, but knowing the Trudeau administration, I'm not surprised that Barton, of all people, became Canada's ambassador to China. Although that didn't end well. Still, it seems being ambassador hasn't stopped Barton from doing business with China well after his time in government. He became the chairman of Rio Tinto Group, the world's top iron ore exporter. As chairman of Rio Tinto, Barton oversaw deals with Chinese corporations, rubbed shoulders with Chinese officials, and promoted Chinese talking points.
What is the sense you're getting in terms of how ambitious this country is, how committed China is when it comes to its climate initiatives?
China's incredibly committed. So there's a talk about, let's all decarbonize and make sure we get to near zero, and then there's a walk. And I think what China has done is walked. They've done it. And what we're finding is the innovation that's going on here is astounding. And that's something that I think we need to cooperate on.
Wow, considering what a well-trained parrot he is, I'm surprised he isn't paid in crackers. China's totally committed to its climate initiatives. Yeah, let's just ignore all the coal plants China's building, its wasteful manufacturing, and all those EV explosions. China's as committed to the climate as Guy Fieri is to unfried foods. The two McKinsey employees I just mentioned are most likely only a drop in the bucket, although it's hard to know for sure because McKinsey's pretty secretive. Who knows how many more McKinsey employees are helping China behind the scenes? Let's just hope at least one of them is giving the advice, seriously, be less evil. Now I got a video I want to show you about standing up to evil. But first, it's time to show love to the people who make this show possible. The China Uncensored 50 Cent Army. Fans who support the show on patreon.com/China Uncensored. As a thank you, I'll answer their questions at the end of these episodes. Today's question comes from, this is a double one. iSeed says, the complete extinction of the CCP can't come soon enough. And Matt Nachazel replied, unfortunately, the CCP owns something like $7 trillion in U.S. debt. Their fall will impact the USA directly. To what degree, I cannot fathom. I'm glad I have a chance to talk about this. So often you'll hear someone say that China owns a bunch of U.S. debt, so that puts the U.S. in a really weak position. But that simply isn't true. China owns about $850 billion worth of U.S. debt. That's only about 2.6% of all U.S. debt. The majority of U.S. debt is owned by Americans. In fact, China isn't even the top foreign holder of U.S. debt. That's Japan at about $1.1 trillion. So debt is not some axe China can hang over the U.S.'s head. In fact, currently, China is in default on $1 trillion of debt owed to U.S. bondholders. The U.S. could utilize them to offset, partially or in whole, the $850 billion plus of U.S. treasuries owed by China, reducing up to $95 million in daily interest paid to China. The real problem the U.S. has is companies like McKinsey, getting the U.S. and China in bed in a variety of ways so that when the Chinese Communist Party collapses, it'll be able to take down everyone still tied to it. So that is the threat and why decoupling is so important. Thank you both for bringing that up, and thank you for your support. Now, there are a lot of dark forces at work in the world today, and it would be easier and a lot more comfortable to just ignore it and try to go about your daily life. But you can only do that for so long before it comes back to bite you. Of course, YouTube might not like me suggesting you stand up to the evil in the world now, so I'm hiding that conversation in gaming content on my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. Check out the video and let me know what you think, and let's fight back against the tides of darkness together. And click on the orange button to support China Uncensored on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.